Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome from wherever you're joining us from. My name is Dorothy Orina. I'm the programs manager here at Melio Games, and this is yet another great episode of the GameUp Africa Meetup series. This is a platform which we use to bring together all creatives on the African continent, storytellers, game developers, game designers, artists, graphic designers, and even those who are interested in joining the game industry, especially the local game industry, and they don't know where to start from. This is your place to meet peers, people who think alike, and to also hear from experts. We invite people who have much more experience in the areas that you're interested in, and they share what they know. And you can get to ask questions and also pick a piece of their experience. So let's see what we have lined up for you today. What to expect. Or we have an amazing speaker joining us today. This is Leyla Mamedova. She's the Cinematic Pipeline Manager at ZeniMax Online, and will be tackling a very critical topic in today's mostly remote and digitized world, remote and globalized teams. So most of you are probably working remotely. Some of you are looking to work remotely, or are trying to maneuver that, trying to navigate how to make sure that you can be able to still achieve amazing results, get a high functioning team within a remote setup. And Layla is going to be tackling that. How do you ensure, even as a leader, that the team members that you have or the people that you're working with are still able to deliver effectively while they are distributed in different places, different cultures, diverse teams? How does that work? We look at all of that. If you have questions, keep them at the end of Layla's session. We're going to introduce a Q&A, and she's going to answer all the questions you may have regarding this very interesting topic. After Layla's talk, we will have Peter Chinonso, who is a game developer and also an alumni of our GameUp Africa Bootcamp, which is a training program that we have at Melio Games. It runs for 5 months every single year from August to December, and we train on game programming, game art, game marketing, and game audio. So if you're interested, be on the lookout. We share this in July. If you want to take part this year, make sure you register for that. Peter was an alumni of the game programming class for last year, and he has developed a game called Reef together with members that he has created a small team with called Vecna Games, and he'll be showing his process today. So let's have fun, take as much notes and insights from the session, and also make sure you ask questions to clarify. And if you had any prior questions you had written, we'll have room for that, and you can get to ask Layla or Peter the questions that you have. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Layla. Layla, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And
Hi.
Leyla, as I mentioned earlier, is the cinematic pipeline manager at ZeniMax Online. And just a brief introduction, because I'm sure she's going to introduce more about herself. She's a games production specialist with a deep love for pipelines and processes in creative fields. Most times we think the creative process is, random sometimes and anything comes in. But in order to make it work, you need to introduce a sort of structure and pipeline to this. And Layla has been doing a lot of research on this. She has a background in indie animation and illustration, which she still pursues as a hobby in her spare time. And currently, she works as a cinematic pipeline manager. So, welcome, Layla.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. You will see my dog in the background. That is Gideon. My cat might also make an appearance. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm really excited to be here. I will say I wrote this presentation while I was sick. I'm still kind of sick, so if I stop making sense at any point, please feel free to shoot me a question. There's my cat. But so while I was thinking about writing this presentation for this audience, right? So Dorothy did mention that you have a creative process and it does appear random sometimes, but I am a firm believer, and I think I have done enough research to show that it is never random. It is actually structured on a set of core social science concepts. And when I was sitting there and thinking about writing this presentation about remote work, I didn't want to be prescriptive in the sense of I didn't want to sit here and be like, all the big studios use Slack, so you should use Slack, and all the big studios use Jira, so you should use Jira. What I wanted to focus on was teaching core concepts, these core, like borderline universal concepts that everybody can take, they can use to evaluate whatever remote work problem they have, and then find the solution that works for them. So this is going to be pretty core concepts. Again, if you have questions, feel free. I have an eye on the chat, and let's get going. So hi, this is me. My name is Leyla. As I've been so wonderfully and generously introduced, Cinematic Pipeline Manager at ZeniMax Online Studios, which is a production specialist position where I am not quite telling people what they need to do and when they need to do it. I am more looking at the structure of how they do it. I am looking at, again, these like core social science concepts and doing a lot of writing, a lot of documentation, that kind of thing. I used to be a producer. I was at Genvid Entertainment on Silent Hill Ascension. If you know of Silent Hill Ascension or you watched Silent Hill Ascension, you might have seen me. I was like on-screen talent for that project. Before that, I was the animation lead at Minnow Mountain. I led a team of tech artists. And during the busiest part of Silent Hill Ascension, I worked with teams in over 10 locations across 3 continents. That was teams in the UK, Malaysia, China, Argentina, Chile, Canada, and there were individual contractors in India and some other places. I play music, I play the violin, I draw, I hike, I do crafts. I find this kind of stuff important to say because game dev has a reputation for being all-consuming. I would like that to stop. I have other hobbies. Some important context. I'm going to account for all experience levels. I'm going to start from the very basics. I'm also a third culture immigrant to the United States, but I still grew up here. So my perspective is very American. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. If it doesn't make sense for you, it doesn't make sense for you. The upside of being on the ground floor of a new and developing industry is that you can establish norms that work for you. You can learn from the mistakes that have been made in the games industry in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in East Asia. There are plenty of case studies, free talks, all sorts of things for you to take a look and see how other people have done things and maybe where they failed. And then you don't have to fail in the same way. First section, let's talk about building culture. This is like the most important thing you can do at any organization. It becomes something you have to pay extra attention to when you are working remotely. It all begins with understanding your team. Solving any problem has to come from understanding the problem. There is no such thing for anything as a one-size-fits-all solution. If someone is telling you that there is, they are trying to sell you something. So the questions you should be asking yourself is, how does your team communicate? What motivates your team? How do they learn? Are the processes that you have in place serving what you are trying to do? Remote work has some implications. One, you have to pay extra attention to how you communicate. We take a lot of like casual social contact for granted. Working with remote teams requires taking extra time and energy to build trust and rapport. So like, for example, if I were giving this talk in person, I would have come in early. I would have seen some folks, maybe said hi, asked some folks how they were. Maybe I would have gotten up, told some jokes. All those things are harder to do in this like really structured remote environment where I am sitting in a studio. I don't see anybody. I had to be let in, right? There was an introduction given and there's no physical contact. I can't smile at anybody. I can't do anything. So it's like these little things you have to pay extra attention to. You have to pay extra attention to security. This will depend on the size of your team, right? If you are working with 3 devs and you guys are just making your own project, you're going to put it on Steam. There's no big IP involved. Like, okay, you can be a little bit loosey-goosey. If you are, let's say, you've decided to open a co-development studio or an outsourced studio and you are working with an external client's IP, they're going to ask you about security. You're going to want a reliable at-home setup. It's a space where you can focus, manage your distractions, have consistent access to internet. And if you're talking with clients, you need to have decent lighting and just like a nice, clean background. As you can see, I don't talk to clients very often. This is my apartment. My coworkers have seen my apartment. It's usually a little bit cleaner, but I just moved. But if I needed to, for example, talk to somebody external, I could blur my background, and I have a very fancy ring light that'll brighten me. But right now I have a headache, so it's not on. Also, remote work requires extra management of your routine, not just your work schedule. We need to feel human. That is very important and is very, in the US at least, not appreciated. Remote workers have to be extra attentive to making sure they eat, exercise, see other people. You want social contact, you need sunlight. We're like a social animal, right? You can't forget that while you're working remotely. Benefits of teamwork. Engaged teams that feel like they belong in their spaces are not just nicer to work with, they are more productive. They produce higher quality work. They have lower rates of turnover. That is like every study that has tackled this subject proves this. And if you start reading management books, which I will recommend a couple, you will start to notice that the management books are geared at a certain type of person, and that type of person is somebody that needs to be convinced that you need to be nice to your workers. I don't need to be convinced. So I'm just telling you the facts. If your team likes their workplace, they will simply be better at their jobs. Let's talk about belonging cues. So author Daniel Coyle, he wrote a book called The Culture Code. I have links to it at the back of the presentation. I recommend everybody read it. It's very short, I promise. But he talks about the importance of belonging cues. Belonging cues are behaviors that create safe interactions in groups. When used successfully, they show other people that you care about them. They establish high standards of performance, and they allow teams to give and receive feedback safely. They also provide answers to the following questions. Are we connected? Do we share a future? Are we safe here? A lot of belonging cues are, again, nonverbal. They happen without us noticing. Things like eye contact, laughter, little things, saying thank you, holding a door open for somebody. If you're like, when I eat lunch with coworkers in the office, if we all have trash, I will sometimes take their trash if I go to the trash can. These like little things. Remote work greatly reduces our ability to issue these cues. So we have to spend extra time and effort making up for that. An important thing you want to do whenever you have an organization of any kind, of any size, is you want to have a rock solid onboarding process. So that means when somebody joins your team, what happens? New team members should always be introduced to the group. I will talk about introductions later. They are an art of their own. Their function and benefit to the team should be very clearly announced, and they should know where to find materials, assignments, and who to go to for help. More important than anything, they must feel welcome in the space. Back to motivation and engagement. Again, you can tell I wrote this when I was sick because I don't remember what I wrote. Engagement and motivation boil down to 3 elements. Flexibility. People want to have choice in how they approach a problem. Challenge. People work best when they can face challenge versus hardship, receive feedback on their work, and see progress towards a goal. So what I mean by challenge versus hardship is challenge is it's something that where do I even want to start with this? Hardship is just unnecessary, right? So like you can make your own life harder in several different ways. So let's say you're trying to do work and your internet is not reliable, it's going in and out. That is a hardship. That is something that is not at all like challenging you towards your goal. There's nothing that will improve by you overcoming this. You will just be less annoyed. Challenge has an opportunity for progress and improvement. And if you challenge somebody at the perfect level for their task, they will enter something called a flow state. That is that, when you get really into something and time kind of stops mattering and you're just really focused and you feel productive and you feel good about what you're doing, that is a flow state. You can read more about flow states if you just like do any baseline searching. The social scientist who did a lot of looking into it, who authored Daniel Pink references, is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He has a very hard to spell name. If you just look into Daniel Pink's book, or flow states, you will find Csikszentmihalyi. But so Daniel Pink refers to these flexibility, challenge, and purpose. He refers to this as autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The researchers he used to reference, Dacey and Ryan, refer to them as autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Academic research that I was looking into about engagement, it's like the same core definition, but they talk about academic, intellectual, and social emotional pillars of engagement. There are like nuances in these spaces, but they all kind of mean the same thing. So, I'm just kind of boiling it down to the overlap between all of those things. Another important thing in remote work, honestly, any work, any communications, is understanding your audience. Professional communication is not about creating some sort of like secondary professional persona for yourself, but it is about understanding who you are talking to. The further removed from you someone is, so like let's say a CEO or someone at a different company, the more selective you need to be with how and what you communicate. This is not only about leveraging trust, it is about respecting people's boundaries, but also as you move up in leadership, what you will find is that if you're on the ground level, your responsibilities tend to be kind of narrow and deep. You will know a lot about a very specific set of subjects. People in leadership are asked to context switch constantly. You have a wider but shallower breadth of responsibility. So when you are talking to somebody, you need to kind of understand where their brain is at so that you can give them the right information to get the result that you want. We talk about team size and scaling a little bit. Oh God, I just got jump scared by my own face. Bigger teams need more rigid and more complex processes. Small teams have fewer people with a wider set of responsibilities. So like I said, if you're on the ground level, that is kind of true, but also of small teams, right? So like you're a 3-person team, you guys are doing like you're wearing just a huge stack of hats. You're doing everything. When I was working in indie animation, I was animating, I was compositing, I was just making assignments, I was doing a bunch of stuff. I'm in, AAA now. I do one thing, but I'm expected to do that one thing well. So, large teams will have more people with a narrower set of responsibilities, as I just said. Understanding how those processes scale is important to setting up healthy remote workflows, as well as working with other teams across the world. So I have some example text here, but I'll just like talk you through practical what that means. If, let's say, for example, when I was working on Silent Hill Ascension, we were a very small team. So generally speaking, there was like one point of contact for everybody. My boss, I reported directly to the director of production on the project. She basically was the point of contact for all of our outsourcing to set all those things up. When I started working with those teams, she delegated that responsibility to me. What that started meaning was I was the only point of contact for them. And eventually we were able to like delegate out more and more portions of that. But because we had a really complicated team setup, there were certain questions only I could answer, or certain questions only a different producer we were working with could answer, or if it had anything to do with money, only she could answer it, right? So you had to like know who specifically to go to. And when you scale that, right, if you're talking AAA, it's like, okay, and this is not how it works at my job because I'm under NDA. I am just making up a fake, situation here, but like, let's say I'm doing key art for marketing for a AAA company. Chances are there's going to be like an art direction contact and like an outsource contact and a billing contact, where at a smaller studio, it'll just be like you, right? So something to keep in mind. And when you build your processes and you're like, oh, I want to grow my team eventually, the key there is really just to like understand what the function of every piece of your process is so that it never becomes more complicated. You're just able to kind of divide out responsibility that was already happening elsewhere. That is something that I wish I could explain better, but it's just kind of something you have to learn through experience, unfortunately. Or a different speaker who's smarter than me. If you find yourself working remotely, setting up a team, doing anything, and you're like, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go next, cold calling is totally normal in our industry. That means just reaching out to somebody without prior contact. If just remember that like the person you're talking to, they don't live inside your head. So I've talked to a lot of game devs. I do a lot of mentoring. I've been to GDC. I've had a lot of conversations where junior devs, for example, or devs who don't have a lot of experience are very self-conscious about asking for help because they feel like it makes them look like they don't know what they're doing. That's not true. Nobody knows what they're doing. Just ask for help. If you reach out to somebody you don't know, or like me, for example, after this talk, briefly introduce yourself and tell them how you've heard of them. I know LinkedIn, for example, has a limited amount of invitations or messages you can send. If you can like put in your headline or on your profile or something, which organization or like something that makes sense to the person you're reaching out to, just to like give them an idea. That's great. Like I used to do mentoring through a program. I would have those mentees reach out to me. I had no idea who they were. And I just often wouldn't answer. I wouldn't have them because I'm just very private. When you ask questions or you ask for a chat, make sure you state what specific topics you need information about. Don't just be like, hey, can we chat? Ask them specific questions. And anytime you ask somebody you don't know to do something for you, explain how much time it is going to take. Do you need 5 minutes of their time, 10 minutes of their time? Do you need to sit down for lunch? It'll help them prioritize the ask. Next, let's talk about understanding power. I'm going to take a nice sip of water while we're here. So there's something called the Power Distance Index. The PDI this is straight from their website. It's a measurement of the acceptance of a hierarchy of power and wealth by the individuals who make up the general population of a nation, culture, or business. What does this mean? There are some places in the world that are really high power distance, and there are some places in the world that are not as high power distance. Power distance is, from me, a layman, a little guy. That is the amount of fear I feel when I look at like a CEO or somebody with more power than me. We'll take a look at a map in a minute. You will notice the entire continent of Africa is pretty neglected in this study. Surprise, surprise, shocker. I'm sure you're all jaws on the floor. I think pieces of southern, like South Africa, and there's a couple of but like West Africa, North Africa are totally neglected by this study. But anyway, when you're working with globalized teams, it is really important to understand what the power distance baseline is of that geography, so that you can kind of understand how that team works. And no culture is a monolith, right? But understanding resources like the power distance index will give you a baseline. So what I mean by that is, some people are quick to say like, oh, if you work with a team in China, they will behave like so, or you work with a team in America, they will be like disrespectful. That's not always true. It depends on the team. It depends on the culture you set up. But understanding things like PDI will give you like an idea of where you can start your assessment. So again, like I said, entire continent of Africa, pretty gray. So like, I don't, the validity of this could be called into question. But you can see, for example, Russia, China, India, really high power distance, really high like hierarchy, right? And I've heard anecdotally about working with, say, like Russian devs, that they're very like, you tell them what to do and they execute. North American, so you see Canada and you see the United States, very low power distance. It's very egalitarian. That is kind of true. I think it depends on the organization. I would say Genvid was pretty egalitarian, pretty equal. I could very freely talk to the CEO. We talked about Sailor Moon a lot. I will say, if you're working at an organization like, say, I don't know, Tesla, probably pretty high power distance there because of the public profile and wealth of the CEO. Again, it depends, but it'll give you a baseline of like what you might be able to expect when you start working with global teams. But again, when you're leaving out most of a continent, you could call some things into question. Quick aside, notes on professionalism. I talk about this all the time. By all standard definitions, professionalism is about carrying yourself with integrity, performing your work with adequate skill and timeliness, and respecting your colleagues. Unfortunately, when you work with globalized teams or remote teams or any kind of team, whatever party is in power gets to dictate the rules of professionalism in any given situation. There's a very public debate in the United States about, unfortunately, like Black Americans and whether or not wearing their hair naturally is professional. It is a very silly debate. It's the way your hair grows out of your head. But it's happening because for a very long time in the United States, only really white people had power, and therefore they got to dictate the rules. Game dev is a little bit looser, right? You can tell I have like my dyed hair. I'm wearing a fun shirt. This is about what I look like when I'm going into the office. I will be going into the office later today. But coworkers of mine wear t-shirts, shorts. It's very loose. But when you're navigating professionalism, it becomes tricky when you work globally, especially if you are on, let's say, the business side of things. So my advice, generally speaking, right, I want you to be successful. My advice is, generally speaking, to play it conservatively whenever you enter a new space, and then see what the rules are, and then you get to choose what boundaries you want to push. So for me, for example, right, I entered the space like not dyed hair, like dressing how I thought you would want to dress for work. Back when I started in animation, and then I learned that there were no rules. Now I dye my hair. I am a lady of mixed heritage. I bring that up a lot. So you get to kind of decide how you want to push those boundaries. I wish the world was different. Unfortunately, I am bound by certain things that annoy me about working in the United States, and it's just useful information to know. Start with a little bit more science. This is more about communications. Ring theory is a crisis management theory where support goes towards the person in crisis, and venting or dumping negative information goes away from the person in crisis. We can take this model and apply it broadly to our professional journeys. Again, this is about crisis management, you can tell, but like the principle is the thing we want to apply. So when we think about applying those principles, we can come up with a little chart like that, pretend it's a ring. I don't know how to make one. On the very outside, you will have your LinkedIn connections, like people you kind of know. Then kind of like the next level in, those will be coworkers, people you work with, you talk to, you might have lunch with, but you talk about like the weather. Then your friends, and then you. You can subdivide that more, you can subdivide that less. And what I mean by this is like, if my LinkedIn connection got a new job, or they just had a baby, or something exciting happened, I will be in those comments. I'm going to be like, oh my God, that's so great. If my team did something worth celebrating, for example, ZeniMax unionized, thrilled about it. I will post about it all day. If something bad happens or annoys me, or there is, if you're on social media and you see the discourse du jour, whatever everyone's talking about, I usually don't say anything. That goes in a group chat. That does not pass that friend barrier, right? So anything from positive from the outside, great, come on in. Anything negative, you're gonna want to hit those barriers, because man, one, nobody wants attention on the internet. You don't want to be the main character anywhere. Two, there's always a record of how we're behaving, right? Not just on social media, not just in our public communications, but like your reputation is very important in game development. It is a social industry. So just something to keep in mind, especially as you're working with remote teams, right? Like, I never try to like vent at people, because again, in remote environments, you have a more limited set of interactions that you have with people that are more structured, because you are not passing them in the hallway. You are not seeing them for lunch. You have a meeting that you are going to. And so it is important to like, just remember to keep it, be honest. But if there's something that's annoying you that could go to a friend, maybe it should go to the friend. Next, last section, tools and techniques. I told you I'd come back to introductions, and here I am. So introducing yourself means telling a story about who you are, tailored to the context that you are operating in. So you want to keep it short, you want to keep it positive. I want to say Dorothy did a fantastic job of introducing me earlier, and if you watch the show Hot Ones, which is that show where celebrities get interviewed, and they eat hot peppers while they do it. It's a good time. The host, Sean Evans, does a really, really good job of this also. He will introduce the guest as if to the audience. There is no audience. It's a camera. He will introduce them to the camera. And then he will pivot to them and say, welcome to the show. And this is a couple of different things. And it's very interesting from like a technical perspective, because he's taking the burden of introducing themselves off of them, right? Because a lot of times like performers or people that he works with, again, this is about knowing your audience, can get self-conscious. Or like if I was asked to introduce myself in some settings, it would be very easy for me to go like, oh, I don't do anything. don't look at me like I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm embarrassed. But having somebody else take that burden off of you and present you positively means you don't risk making a fool out of yourself. So if you have a new person, sometimes it's easier to go, hi, look at this person. They're so great. Thank you so much for joining our team. And that introduces them positively and then pivots the attention to them. Remote work gives you flexibility if cameras on or off. I prefer cameras on for introductions. You can turn off later if it bothers you. Make sure any new addition to the group gets introduced to the group. So don't ever bring anybody, or, I don't recommend bringing anybody in and being like, this is so-and-so. Hi, so-and-so, let's do the work. You really want to take the time to be like, this is so-and-so. So-and-so, tell us about yourself. All right, everybody, now you introduce yourselves. Keep it positive, keep it light, make sure they know. The other thing that I didn't write in this presentation, but is very important to know, in game dev, you have a lot of acronyms, initialisms, words that sound like things, but they're not things. You want to make sure you define those, or you spell them out, or you say them repeatedly until you hear that person using them freely and you know that they know. Initialisms, acronyms, like, really easy to make people feel left out if you are using them. I cannot talk. Being on camera as a professional, you will be required to appear on camera at least sometimes. This can be a source of stress and discomfort for some people, but it is necessary. Again, talking about scaling teams, when you work with large teams, they will want to see your face for legal reasons. They want to know you are the person you say you are. So it's also helpful for teamwork. You want to put a name to a face. For example, you've seen my face. I'm just like a friendly, non-threatening little guy. If I just type to you, I can come off kind of, not like rude, but I can come off very direct if I don't have my hand gestures. So I like to keep my camera on. If you are uncomfortable being on camera, you can hide your self view, right? If you are on Slack or on Teams, you can hide the little box with your face in it so you don't have to look at yourself. Make sure you're prepared with a self presentation that works for you. So, like, for example, for me, that means I usually, if I have to appear on camera, like for a recording, I do my hair. I throw on a little bit of concealer or makeup. I'm wearing more makeup than I normally would today because, again, I'm going into the office. And I told myself I would use it up. I put on, just like a clean, nice piece of clothing. That way I don't have to think about it. It's off my mind. I'm good. And then pick and choose times where you can give yourself a break. So like in meetings, if I'm not talking or if I'm not expected to participate, I'm just sitting there to listen, camera off. I'm relaxing. I actually have a little bit of embroidery next to me that I sit and I work on just to give myself a little break because my brain gets really loud and it is important for me to do that for me. Choosing a tool and a platform. So this is, again, where I don't want to get prescriptive. I don't want to tell you use Slack or don't use Discord or do whatever. At the end of the day, you do what's right for your team and your budget and your purpose. But here are some things you want to consider. If you are choosing like a text platform for remote work, you want to focus on searchability. So communications platforms are not for just like chatting. You want to be able to reference what was said in the past. Same for recording. If you have voice or video, you want the ability to record those calls, not just for records, but hey, let's say somebody can't make a meeting, record it for them, make sure they know where that recording lives, send it to them with notes, tell them what's important. This also helps with time zones if you are working with globalized teams. For example, I think it is like 4 or 5 o'clock local for some of you. It is 11 in the morning for me. I am just getting started with my day. So like, soon, like I would not send a meeting to you guys if it was much later, if we were working together. Again, security, if you're working with sensitive conversations, you have to be able to protect them. Bigger companies will ask for this if you work with co-development or outsource studios or just for clients, like as a freelancer. Be careful about crossing personal and professional communication. You want to be able to have casual conversations at work, but like some things are sensitive. You might want to like not put them in writing at work where they can be referenced, or like, let's say I need to send a screenshot of a conversation to somebody. I don't want to be like censoring or cropping out like personal information when I'm just trying to tell somebody that a decision has been made. I'm gonna keep that in mind. Distributing information, another challenge of remote work is making sure that our teammates retain information, especially critical information about tasks and milestones. So memory is tied to different senses. I don't know if this is like a fun fact. Your nose, your smell actually is like the strongest tie to memory for some reason, just like chemically. But if you think about it, like I remember things, I have like a more physical memory, so I can remember where things are. If I remember what I was physically doing at the moment or what I was like wearing, remote work takes that away from you. You only have what you are reading or what you're talking about. So you have to be like super diligent about repeating information constantly. Meetings have to have specific goals and outcomes. Once they end, make sure you distribute action items. Every action item should be assigned to a specific individual, preferably with a priority, preferably with a due date. Smaller teams won't do that. Anytime a decision is needed, remember to communicate context and consequence. So, what information does that decision maker need? What will their outcomes do? Do they unblock work? Do they change something? Will they change scope? They need to know this. Repeat information often and in different formats. Say it in a meeting, say it in text, put a blast out, send it an email. Email is great for like long-term record keeping. Also, follow your teammates. Where do they normally go to find information? Is everybody telling you they are looking in Slack, in Discord, in their email? You send information to where they are already looking because it is so much easier to take advantage of people's natural habits than change their habits. Some more tips for communicating across cultures and languages. Work with your language barrier for voice and video calls. Do as I say, not as I do. Speak slowly, speak clearly. I'm very sorry about my personality. Follow up with written notes. Give plenty of opportunity for follow-up questions. Ask questions. If someone said something you don't understand, whether conceptually or you didn't hear them, ask them to repeat themselves. Ask them to write it. Ask them to rephrase. Ask them like a comparative question. Be like, oh, do you mean like XYZ? Don't walk away with a meeting with an unknown that you feel like you have to figure out. You should have a clear understanding of what's going on. Be mindful of your tone, audience, age, culture, mood, changes how we talk, changes how we type. I have a coworker that I was convinced hated me because I would send him writing to edit, and he would come back with like very properly written, very properly punctuated notes. And I was like, oh, this person can't stand me. We spoke in person, nicest, like we are friends. Nicest person I've ever met, so enthusiastic. We just have drastically different ways of communicating via text. But now I know that. If you have to have a difficult conversation, sometimes it is best to just schedule a call. Do not go back and forth in email. Do not go back and forth, like via chat. That is such an easy way to misunderstand each other. It has happened to me. I've had to resolve it for other people. Just schedule a call. Also, share your culture. It's really hard to describe how many small cultural references we use in day-to-day speech. Let people into your experience. I will pull an example from this very presentation. Earlier, let's see if I can get back to it quickly. I had this GIF in here from High School Musical, and I put it in and I thought to myself, I don't know if High School Musical made it out of the United States. Is that a global phenomenon? I don't know. So, I put it in here because it's pretty obvious. But at the same time, like if I sit at my job in the United States with people that are about my age and I go, we're all in this together, like chances are someone's going to clap because they know that's the choreography. But whether or not that happens in like globalized environments is crazy. But like if that happened, if I were to make a High School Musical reference in front of a globalized team, then I would try to explain it because it's a goofy movie and I think everybody should have the joy of it. So I highly encourage people to do that. Whew, that was the last slide. I've been talking forever. I am more than happy to take questions. In the meantime, I'm going to take a little sip of my drink. Oh, before I go on, I will give Dorothy these slides to distribute. I put links to a bunch of resources. Again, Daniel Coyle, Culture Code, Daniel Pink, Drive, really good books, really short books. I would read them if you have time, but also there's like a talk summarizing it. There's websites summarizing it. I gave those resources. If you want to go straight to the science, U of R researchers, Ryan and Daisy, write about self-determination theory. That is about like motivation and finding intrinsic motivation in a task, right? We were talking earlier about creative processes needing structure. That will help you understand how motivation works and how to structure your creative process around it, or your team's creative process around it. And then there's the pillars of student engagement. That's more about learning. But again, like I said, 3 core concepts, they're all very similar. Just interesting reading, and hopefully a good starting point for rabbit holes for everybody to go down and get the information that they need for their level of experience or what they want to do. Okay, now I'm done, and now I am ready for Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Leyla. I love your presentation, and I especially like how you put into context how remote work can be, because when you tell people you're working remotely, they think you are living in heaven, like how convenient it is, how easy it is. And you've shared how the challenges that can be there and also how to maneuver them. I mean, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. We're going to take
I'm
questions.
so glad.
Yeah. We had a question here from Dennis Kamal, and he asks, what advice do you have for managing time for work-life balance while working remotely?
Ooh, okay. I struggled with this for a really long time. Remote work, again, we go into these flow states, and in remote work, there's no like, oh, I'm sitting in an office. I did this to my coworker the other day when I was in the office. Oh, I'm in the office, I'm in the zone, but it's like past time to leave. There's no one standing over my shoulder going, hey, we are leaving. Like, let's go. Like, you can finish tomorrow. Don't even worry about it. Let's move. I did that to a coworker literally last week, where he was like sitting and animating, but it was like 6:15, and I was only there because I was doing something like on my phone, and I got distracted. And I was like, hey, let's move. I'm leaving. You're leaving. Let's go. We're not crunching. We're not doing anything. There's no deadline. Like we're going. And you have to be that person for you. And again, it's learning. You really have to take the time to learn how your brain works. And then figure out what works for you. So like, for example, a lot of people I know set phone alarms for everything. They set phone alarms for when they need to eat. They set phone alarms for when they need to stop working. If I hear a phone alarm, I will break my phone. I cannot stand noise. I don't like being surprised. So that doesn't work for me. What does work for me is my dog. My dog will tell me when it's time to go to the bathroom. And then I know, oh, if my dog needs to go to the bathroom and he's telling me he needs to go to the bathroom, I'm working too late. It is time to stop. It's time for me to like move on. I structure my meals in very specific ways. I meal prep in very specific ways. So, and it's all tailored to me. So the the first of the work-life balance thing is like, figure out how you work. Try a bunch of stuff. But once you have a routine, stick to it, and just like every 6 months or so, reevaluate it, see what's working, see what's not. Your needs will change. But just make sure that you're doing it for you. Don't just like go on a blog and be like, how do I balance work and life? Or ask somebody like me and then take everything I say as law, or take everything that blog says as law. Really spend some time with yourself, figuring out what works, and go from there. Yeah, sorry, there was a lot for a simple concept.
Yeah, I love that. During your talk, you mentioned understanding how other people work in order
Mhm.
to know how to deal with your team members. And it's also coming up that you need to also know how you work to make that work for you.
You're a member of your team, right? And like,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
good to explain, be able to explain yourself to other people too. So like, I can tell my boss like, hey, I'm not like if I have to flex schedule, it's because something's happening. I like a structured 10 to 6 work day with a lunch, right? Some people don't like that. Or some people are parents, right? We got parents in the game dev industry who like need to flex schedule because of stuff with their kids. But like, it's good for me to be able to explain how I like to work to my boss, so that I'm predictable. You want to be predictable for your teams. Anyway, I see we have a new question.
Yeah, thanks for that. So this is Christopher, and he asks, what is an acceptable timeline to give a new hire to adapt to the team culture, especially when they are joining in a crucial development period that is time sensitive?
It's a really good question. So, when you apply to jobs, or especially like in North America, I've noticed this. Sometimes studios will be like, you must have shipped so many AAA titles, or you must have gone through a full cycle, or something like that. That is not really about your level of experience most of the time. That is like, hey, we are in a specific part of production and we might want you to jump in knowing what's happening. So, for example, on Ascension, I went through a full cycle of development. I was there from pre production to launch to live ops. So, I have live ops experience. It's very valuable. That way, joining any other project, I can say, hey, I've gone through pre production, production, that horrible period right before you ship, and live ops. And if you're asking me to jump in on cinematics or on art, I can do that pretty easily. If you're asking me to jump into engineering, I'm gonna need some help. Um, it it actually takes 6 months to fully onboard somebody, and it takes a year for them to become fully effective. So that is where experience levels start to matter more, which is like, hey, if I need immediate support on a project I am trying to ship, you might want somebody who's shipped a project before, somebody that you've worked with before that it's a more known element. If you are just looking to expand your team, you can be a little bit more lenient with those things, but just keep in mind that like it is my year anniversary next month. I just now feel like I know what my job is. It really, really takes a lot more time than you think it is. If you want to do more research or reading on this, there's some studies about Boeing, the air manufacturer. Um, before Boeing, before their build quality started to deteriorate, and before they had a bunch of upsets, they actually had a really good work culture, and I think they had a good some good writing about onboarding. Good question.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that. Um, do we have any other question? Just type it in the chat and we can read it out to Layla. I'm going to give it about a minute before we can close it. So
Sure.
if you have any questions, just bring them up. Layla is here to answer them.
I'm gonna take this as my talk was perfect. There was no flaws. I
Mhm.
did not miss
And we
any
understood.
information. Yeah, and everyone is a perfect remote worker equipped with all the tools they need to work. I'll tell a funny story while we are waiting for questions. So I was working with a group of devs, and again, I'm an immigrant, right? So I'm from Russia. My family is from the Middle East. They fled a war to Russia, and that's how I ended up here. So I very familiar with you know war and things like that and what it does to a people. And I remember I was sitting in a meeting with one of our dev teams that I was working with from Southeast Asia, and there is this perception about Americans that we don't know anything about the world, which is kind of true. Our school system has failed us in very funny ways. But I was talking to this team, and they were like, "Oh, it was our Independence Day," and I was like, "Oh, who did you become independent from? Was it one of the big four? Was it France or England or Spain or Portugal?" And she started laughing, and they all just go England at the same time, because again, it was just like a moment where I was able to engage with that. I didn't talk about making small talk, but like the art of small talk is very much just like being able to tell a story about what's going on around you, right? It's not just asking about the weather, it's asking about how the weather is affecting you. If it looks gray out, like how did things, how gray is it? Is it stopping your kid from going to school? And so it was just like a really nice moment to be able to be like, hey, I hear you. I understand what Independence Day means. And just to like make a fun joke about at Europe's expense. And we always like to joke about at Europe's expense. They're fine over there. And I think the French deserve to get made fun of every once in a while. So yeah, that's did any questions roll in while I was babbling?
No, I think we all understood the presentation. And again, if you want to review this talk again, it's live on YouTube. It will be there. So you can just go back and review anything that is not clear, or you find yourself in such a situation and you want to get back and get some notes, you can always review it.
You can
And
also send me
there are these
follow-up
resources.
questions. Yeah, there's resources. You can also send me. Sorry for interrupting you. You can send me follow-up questions. I hang out in the game production community Discord. If you are a producer, you can find me there. If you're not a producer, you can find me on LinkedIn. Again, please just send me a message telling me how you know me. Happy to take follow-up questions if you think of something later.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, Leyla. This has been very, very insightful, especially for leaders who are managing teams and people who are in teams that are diverse and very distributed. I think the people can pick up a thing or two on how to make sure that this process are more streamlined, and how they can make their teams work more effectively, get a much better outcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your time, everyone.
All right, enjoy the rest of your day, Leila. So we're going to move on to the next part of our meetup today. And as I mentioned earlier, we have one of our GameUp Africa alumni. GameUp Africa is our training program by Melio Games. And today we have the pleasure of having Peter Chinonso, who took our programming training last year. And he's built a game with his colleagues. They've formed a little game studio called Vecna Games. And they just finished a game that they uploaded. And he wants to share with us how that development process has been. So welcome to join us, Peter. I'm going to add you to stage now. Peter? Yes. Welcome, Peter. Do you have your presentation ready?
Good day, everyone. My name is
Hi, Peter. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you share your screen so that I put it on stage?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can you see it? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, my name is Peter, from an alumni from GameUp Africa. I'm glad to be here to share experience or insights in making a game. After everything I've learned from the GameUp Africa podcast. So me and some group of people, we made a game called Riff, where you dive into the ocean, exploring obstacles, and do gameplay. Gameplay similar to that survey. So we're here to give you small insight, show you how it works. This is Riff. The objective of the game now is just explore the ocean. Players try to beat the current high score. Play the game, try to earn more high scores, beat every other users. The day of trying to keep in touch with other users, try getting a high score. While also moving to the game, you can earn coins, which you can use to purchase fishes. But for now, we have little fishes in the game shop. While collecting coins and other items. Gameplay. So,
Hi, Peter. Does your video have sound?
can you hear me? I'm having issues with network on this side.
Oh, okay. All right. In that case, you can turn You can turn off your video. It usually improves the quality of sound. So just turn off your video and then we can see your screen.
Okay, you say okay, okay. Is it clear now?
Put it on full screen. All right. Can you play the video now?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Peter, your video is
Not
lagging a bit. Maybe you can go to the next
yeah,
slide.
yeah. Let's continue. So the objective of the game, like I said before, is to explore the ocean, moving through obstacles. So the core game look now. You swim through the you swim through the oceans, dodge sharks and anything that is harmful to fish. Obstacles that can actually drain your life, buy any more points and collecting power to actually improve how the game for the gameplay. We have the obstacles now, the kind of obstacles that you can actually watch out for when playing the game. Two obstacles that we've actually implemented in the game. We've not more will still be added, shark, add the great white shark and the hammerhead. The great white shark swims through the ocean, search of the next meal, while the hammerhead, sneaky fellas, just have a way of blending in the environment. For the collectibles, these are the coins and the power ups, things to watch out for. They can actually extend your life in the game, give you more endurance as you last long in the game. Everybody knows the magnet does brings the coins to you, share. So you can have enough coins to get a new fish. And then we have the pearls. This one now, they are the one that give you more power in life, because some fishes will have power up, and the more power every time you use a power up, it actually drains your life. And over time too, your life goes down, and the more you collect, life too goes down. So this power up now is actually an element that gives you more power over the game. So the more you collect it, the more you so we have the now let me watch this up. The details, the development details we use in the for the game. We started ending of last year, early of close to the beginning of this year, January to March. We used Unity, a software that we learned during the GameUp Africa. It's actually a good event from the bootcamp. The artist, we use a different set of publisher from the artist, which we use Blender, and the sound, we got it online. We didn't have any sound on the mark, so we paused it. So this is actually a brief overview of the game. Any questions I would like to answer? Can you hear me?
All right. Thanks, Peter. We had a bit of difficulty getting to hear the whole presentation. So we'll just share that the link to the game again. You have it published on itch.io, right? So you can also get comments from people
Yes,
as they play the game. How many people did you develop this game with?
yes, those were because I think it was hard to pencil code as well.
Can you come again? How many people?
I said we were 7.
Seven of you. All right. Okay. And can
Yeah.
you tell us what sort of challenges you faced? Because this was your first time getting to work with a team outside the GameUp Africa bootcamp. So you're out of training and you meet people that you want to develop a game with. How is that experience?
It was actually stressful in a way, but then because a student, well, as a student now, because we teach us of it to be online, so it made it easier. And no, I wasn't the only one. Some of us in the team too participated in the Game of Africa, but the thing, it was actually hard, but not impossible. I faced a lot of issues in the sense that it took a lot of time before everybody became serious in a way. Everybody had their own priority. So it just took everybody had to like allocate a specific amount of time and let us finish this stuff because if we keep postponing it, there will be no we just procrastinating it. So we had to sacrifice a lot of time and effort to bring it to reality. Did you hear what I say?
All right. Yeah. I had you. And thanks for sharing that. I mean, the game development process, in as much as you're developing something fun, it can get challenging at some point, especially working with a team, working with different people. But we're glad to see that you managed to overcome that and release the game eventually. We give you some feedback on Discord. So having a community to play test and give you feedback can also enable you to iterate and make a greater experience out of it. James
Yeah,
is
more updates.
asking, okay. James says this is some beautiful work. And how did you do the audio on your project?
Okay. So the audio aspects, like I said before, we didn't make the audio. We downloaded it online. So not much effort was put into the audio. The only thing that was put into it was during the coding aspects, some class implementation, some stuff I implemented with my fellow programmers. I implemented um, really a singleton pattern, try to make it optimize. So where you can be able to play different music while still playing in the same scene. Not much work was put into the audio because it was downloaded. Um,
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing. And we'll share the link to the game, right, so that people get to also experience it and they can give you comments on the game as you continue working on that. But thank you for joining us today for this meetup and also sharing what you've worked on. All right. So this brings us to the end of our meetup today. Thanks, Peter. And as we come to the end of this session, we'd like to know what you think of this event. If you have any topics that you're interested in and you'd love to see speakers come in and speak about them, let us know so that we get to invite them and you gain as well as the other members of our community. If you're interested in game design, we have a 2 hour training session coming up next week. We've just shared the link on the chat. We'll also send it on the post event email. So just register for that. It's a short introduction to game design. If you're new to the game industry, you don't need to have any prior experience. If you have young ones with you that are interested in this, please share this with them, and it gives them a foundation into what games are, what the elements of games are, and if they want to start developing their games, where do they even start from. This link on this, there's a QR code on the screen, but we're also going to share a link. Just give us feedback on how this event has gone, where we can improve on, and what you'd like to see from our future upcoming events. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have another meetup. We run this every single month on the third Wednesday of the month. So we'll see you again in May. Bye bye, and enjoy the rest of your day.